Two. Hello, check. What's up, folks? How's it going? Chin. Doop. Oh, man, it's the spot. Just having some leftovers. Leftovers from my dinner last night. Very nice. Just finishing those off. I had graduation photos done. Now I'm kind of drunk. Very nice. It was 3 o'clock somewhere. Dakadoon, what sandwich you working on? Turkey, nice. I believe it's called Turkey now. Keep this going for a little bit. Ugh. So did you have an okay night? My night was pretty standard. Hung out with my son. Made some dinner. Put him to bed. I did a podcast episode at night. Just released a brand new episode of The Insurgents with Twitter's barbarism critic. I'm going to link it right there. 3 geese in a trench coat. Hello. I pulled a Rob and fell asleep during the Mavs OKC game. I also fell asleep during that game. So you did indeed pull a Rob, although I at least fell asleep like towards the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth. So it's more respectable, you know? It was a little bit more respectable. I actually fell asleep towards the end of the game, not at the very beginning. So my stamina is improving. I did not see the Luka presser. I think I saw a headline about it, and then I went to look into it, and I somehow got distracted. I saw the Cavs one as well, fairly convincingly. Would love an upset there. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think it would be great if it did. It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
The ball and our energy was great.
What do you think? Okay. Okay, moving on.
We were open shots, so just our sharing the ball and our energy was great.
What do you think?
His face is great. Oh my god. No, okay, I definitely did not see that. I definitely did not see that, no. Look at his face. God, people gotta be more responsible. Like with the Jeffrey Tubin and like... you know, I'm not judging anyone's lifestyle or their personal habits or what they're into, but like, surely it can wait, you know? Surely it can wait.
We were open shot, so just our sharing the ball and our energy was great.
What do you think? Okay.
His face is so funny. Oh my god. That just happened. Anyone else hear that? That's so good.
Okay, moving on.
We were open shot, so
It's the stare right at the camera. What's the official story? I don't know. This is the first time hearing about it. So I don't know. Rob Perez says tonight someone learned the video does not stop playing when you disconnect from Bluetooth. That's a great face. I wonder if that's going to make it onto Shaqtin' a Fool. No, you know what I mean though? Like, surely it can wait. You're at an NBA press conference. You're at an NBA press conference. Surely it can wait. I don't know if that's the locker room. Like, how close is the locker room? The locker room has doors on it. This seems to be in the room. NBC's supposed to be getting the rights from TNT. I did hear that, although I did also hear the possibility that Inside the NBA will move and maybe be on Prime. I saw NBA is going to be on Prime as well. It would be pretty foolish to break. That's definitely the best, like, most entertaining NBA show, so it'd be pretty foolish to break that up. Oh, so now press rooms are no goon zones. We're making fun illegal now. Is that what's happening? Due to wokeness. Ever seen those guys in newsrooms caught looking at porn on live news coverage from the press room? Press rooms are the original goon zones. Like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like I said, no judgment here. They gotta stop giving the iPad to Josh Giddey. No judgment here, you know? Do whatever you want in the privacy of your own home. You know, that's none of my business. That's none of my concern. But like, maybe when you're at like your place of business, you're on a Zoom call with your colleagues, you're at an NBA press conference, maybe you can hold back a little bit. Like, maybe you can wait a little bit. You know? Call me old-fashioned, but IMO gooning should be kept as a private affair. Exactly. Unless there's some kind of consensual situation happening. Some kind of observation or whatever. You know? I think maybe that should be kept in the privacy of your own home, personally. Keep it in the cave. That's what the caves are for. This NBA press conference room is not... That's not your cave. That's not your gooning cave. Jesus. No, I had not seen that, surprisingly. I had not seen it. Quite something, though. Pay to goon policy, chat. The reaction is great. Yeah, like... That's really funny. That's very funny. Hang on, I'm just going to go bring my plate away and blow my nose. I'll be right back. Just here, look at Luka Doncic for 1 sec. Okay. He's actually seething. They started the group goon sesh before his presser was over. God. Wow. Anyway, that should be a good series. Again, I missed the end of the game, but... I missed the end of the game, but should be a really good series.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Rob, we've just lost the oldest man yelling at clouds, and you aren't making this entire stream a tribute to him? Shame.
That is true. Thank you, Progressive Canuck, for the 33 months tier 1. And yeah, shout out to his family. R.I.P. Rex Murphy. Iconic Canadian figure. It's just, I think it's confusing because this man has looked like a walking corpse for like about the last 20 years, so I think a lot of people were surprised to hear that he actually died recently, because it's like, that guy was alive? Like, what is going on with that? What is going on with that guy? Professional, shitty curmudgeon, and intellectual. Yeah, quote unquote intellectual. It says so much about Canada that this is one of our celebrated commentators, and by gosh, I didn't always agree with them, but I would love to hear what he had to say about anything. I fucking hate that shit. I may not have agreed with what he said, but oh boy, could he ever say the things. Could he though? Really? That's all it takes to impress the average, like, liberal media class Canadian. Take your boring conservative curmudgeon complaining and just run it through a thesaurus. And people will be singing your praises, no matter what you have to say. People are going to be talking about how fucking great you were. It's so sad. Our whole, like, opinion columnist class in this country is just such an absolute disgrace. It's like, it can't even at least be fun like it is in the UK. Like, it's a disgraceful class of people in the UK, but at least they're, like, having fun with it. Here it's just boring. It's just boring ranting. It's just boring racist ranting. And everyone just laps it up. Someone should get to his body before it's in the ground and drive a stake through his heart just to be sure. I'd put a stake through his heart and garlic around his neck to make sure he never come back. Who's going to take the kind of conservative media jerk-off king? Andrew Coyne, Justin Ling, Joe Roberts. I would say Coyne out of that group. Ling is like, he's basically a Marxist compared to those people. Like, they probably, our Canadian, like, opinion columnist class look at Justin Ling and they're like, who's this radical? Who's this radical lefty? That's what they say about Justin Ling. Joe Roberts, I don't know how much longer Joe Roberts is going to be able to have a platform. There's been some interesting investigations into Joe Roberts. A person who has, like, repeatedly centered his Jewish identity in order to promote Israel and its values and its goals, and to smear anyone that's supporting Palestine. And it's unclear whether this man is actually Jewish. There's been some investigations into Joe Roberts. It seems like he's lied or deliberately, like, misled people or obscured his actual, like, family history, backstory, and he's centered Jewishness. He's centered his Jewishness in crafting this whole, like, identity, especially over the last couple of years. Because even like 2-3 years ago, he was kind of trying to be a progressive, like, leftist type. And since then, he's pivoted to be this, like, this fully in the tank, fully pro-Israel, pro-Zionist demagogue, basically, and has centered his Jewish identity on this transition, which it seems like is non-existent. Stolen Jewish valor. I think there's a number of cases of this. I've heard of other cases of this as well. I'm going to show you what I mean here. So this is Joe Roberts' latest piece in the National Post. Hamas must be destroyed in Rafah with or without Biden's help. There's a lot of questions and comments and concerns about Joe Roberts' identity. That was in this thread by Christy Olson here. Canadians love stealing identities of marginalized groups. Absolutely, yeah. It seems to be a really common thing in here. And you can see in his bio, Defense and Foreign Affairs, Winston Wilmot. For the people, for democracy, for human rights. Columnist, husband, dad, Jew. Joe Roberts. And here you have this tweet from him. I know this was, I can't remember when this was. I think it was a couple years ago. This is my grandmother, Z, taught me everything I know about what it means to be Jewish. She even set me on a path to dedicate my life to the Jewish community. Her family left the Pale of Settlement in 1895, escaping the horrors of the Holocaust, and ended up in Lowell, Massachusetts, where she grew up. It was a tough childhood. She shared a home with her extended family, aunts and uncles, her father and sister, and her great-grandmother. None of them spoke English. Yiddish was the only language of the home. Her father, my great-grandfather, made his living peddling rags. As a child, I once asked her what that meant. I'll never forget how she looked at me. What do you think it means? He sold rags off a cart, he says. And look at this piece here. This is from this piece here about Joe Roberts. Says his passion for Judaism continued post-college. Initially, he started to work in politics and ran for Congress in 2010, but lost. He was stuck and unsure of what to do next. When he spoke with his grandmother, she said, "Well, what do you care about?" He decided the Jewish community was at the top of the list. So after 2010, he tried to run for Congress. He flamed out. He wasn't sure what to do. And his grandmother, who always inspired him like this, and inspired him to, look into it, reconnect with his roots. After 2010, he spoke with her, and she gave him the direction that he needed. The issue, though, is that Joe Roberts' grandmother died in either 1989 on one side or 1981 on the other side. So how was he having a conversation with his Jewish grandma that inspired him to reconnect with his roots in this way and to spend the rest of his adult life fighting for Israel's right to have an apartheid ethno-state? In 2010, when she had been dead for around 30 years at that point.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
CSPO7.
Canada's George Santos is not nearly as cool. No, I know. That's what I mean. Like, if he was at least like a George Santos, he was like a fun character. This guy, there's nothing fun about this guy. There's nothing fun or funny about it. Echo Waves, thanks so much for the Prime. 2 months of Prime from Echo Waves. Actually, okay, I got 2 notifications. Subscribed with Prime and converted from Prime to sub to a tier 1 sub. Echo Waves, thank you very much. Thank you, Echo Waves. I appreciate it. And there's all kinds of stuff I'll show you in this. I'll link this thread here. There's a whole thread here about this. This is from his old LinkedIn that he apparently forgot about. This article from 2010 as well. On September 22nd, more than 150 members of the local Jewish community received an email with the banner, "Turner's no friend of the Jewish people." 2 paragraphs down is the statement, "Click here to fight anti-Semitism today," with a direct link to the Joe Roberts for Congress contribution form. Roberts, who identifies as Jewish, is the underdog Democratic challenger to U.S. Rep. Mike Turner. Is that how that works? I don't think that is how that works. Yeah, no, she said... That's right, she said the main difference between him and Santos is that Santos is funny and won his election. His lies during his campaign were equally insane.
Please, the next question, first we'll go to Joe Roberts. Please explain what it is about your educational, family, employment, or other experience background that makes you a good choice to serve this district in Congress.
I'm glad you asked that question, whoever asked that question. But, I think it's a good question. It does give you, your family and your background is what makes you who you are.
The next.
No juice. No juice. Anyway, there's going to be more investigations about this, I'm sure. But I think, instant charisma, just really, all eyes just gravitate towards him, I know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not so sure about this guy, about this character. And I don't think he's responded to any of it. That's also a good point as well. I'm just reading the comments here. It didn't even I read it, but I had to re-look at it again. Her family left the Pale of Settlement in 1895, escaping the horrors of the Holocaust. I read that, but it didn't quite click that the Holocaust happened several decades after that. I don't doubt that there was anti-Semitic climate, in a number of different places in Europe and elsewhere. Yeah, maybe they meant pogroms. I don't know. Weird guy. This is Israel, isn't supporting Israel is all he talks about. And he hasn't responded. His timeline is all just retweeting Israel stuff. Israel propaganda. Anyway, we'll keep our eye on that developing story. We've had a Santos this whole time. That's right. I forgot who this guy is. Well, he's in Canada now, but he ran for Congress in the US. I guess he's based in Canada now. But he's just, I remember a couple years ago, he tried to start the Democratic Socialists of Canada.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Deport this guy? I agree. Kijiji, thanks for the gifted sub. I appreciate it. And Dr. Maggot coming through with the first. Joe Roberts was DSA Canada. That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. Just close the border until we figure out what the hell's going on. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Sorry, but as an Oklahoman, I'd rather have George Santos than any other Republican we have here. I would not rather have that dead fish, no Riz, having lump. Like I said, Santos is at least like fun. You know, you can have fun with a Santos. Simply no Joe Mentum. I'm going to find something for us to put on, maybe Democracy Now! Or oh, this looks good. There's an Al Jazeera here thing about the impact of student encampments on for Gaza at universities worldwide. You need some green tea from your throat? I don't have any green tea. I do have chamomile. Part of my problem is that I spend 4 hours a day talking into a microphone, and it's just having a hard time in my throat a little bit. First, let's take a look at some of the footage here. Some of the footage here of these encampments getting stormed, and then we have some footage from some stuff from Al Jazeera to take a look at. But two encampments here. We got the Calgary. The Calgary encampment was stormed by riot cops last night. Here's some footage. Have you seen the IDF dude crying between the tents? Yeah, I have. Yeah. It's really crazy. I mean, this is exactly what like we've been holding up as examples of people being unsafe and made to be scared, and made to be intimidated. Literally, people, not only people with connections like to the Israeli embassy, but actual people that have been in the IDF, just going into these encampments and screaming and crying about how unsafe they are. The Shai Davidai method. This is Calgary. If you want to talk about these protests and encampments being violent situations, this is the violence. This is where the violence is coming from. My favorite thing to do when I feel unsafe is put myself into the middle of the situation that makes me feel that way, definitely. Look at them all. Look at them all. These are, again, students sitting on the grass. Look at all these, and all these conservatives as well. Private property. Oh, you're occupying private property. It's trespassing. These people are so pathetic. These conservative people that are like, don't tread on me. Don't tread on me. All these people, I'm sure to the person, the people that make these kind of comments were shocked and horrified when the police dealt with the Ottawa convoy occupiers, and they all acted like they were getting beaten by the Gestapo when the police came to bust up the convoy protest after it went on for multiple weeks, not on college campuses, but on like public streets. On like public streets where they're like just ruining the lives of everyone that lives there with nonstop, extremely loud noise, and going to scream in the face of like service workers for weeks and weeks. And then the cops finally break that up and they act like they're the victims of like this horrible repressive authoritarianism. And then the exact same people, private property. These students, they're on private property or there's encampments. To say nothing of how these students are like paying tuition at these schools. If you wanted to be trespassing, give me my $50K back. Yeah. That's not fair. Not all conservatives, plenty of libs in those comments. Yeah, I don't doubt that that's true either. The don't tread on me people, though, they uniformly love this, though. Don't tread on me, but definitely tread on those other people.
We're moving down on the sidewalk, like the building corner.
Don't tread on me, but definitely I want you to try to tread on other people as well. I like the treading. It's not that I don't like the treading, it's just who you're treading on. When it's me, no. When it's others, yes.
Whoa, we just had an explosion. We just had an explosion here. They just tear gas people. They're coming. Okay, they're shooting. They're shooting. They're shooting. They're shooting. Oh, God. Oh my God, they're shooting. They're shooting paintballs at people.
And is anyone in Calgary? Like, this encampment hadn't been up for a long time, had it? "16 hours.
What happened? What happened?
I got the tear gas in my eyes.
You brought it here.
Jeez. See if I can find some more footage. This is my friends in Alberta Advantage.
And remove yourself from the situation.
The thin blue line between pallets and no pallets.
Throwing things at the officers. We are asking you to leave the property.
I believe the McGill encampment is still up. I hope so anyway. This is also a funny image, though, from the campus. Disrupt something. Disrupt something. The University of Calgary. Disrupt something, but not this, though. Not this, though. And again, like we did the live stream from the McGill encampment a couple weeks, 2 weeks ago. These are students, occupying this space. This has been the tradition for in university campus activism for years and years and years. It's students occupying space, doing homework, chanting, staying in tents. And this is what it's being met with. And yeah, this was like a few hours after being put up, this encampment. And contrast that with the oaf occupation in Ottawa. The oaf occupation, which went on for 3 weeks, where it was actually disruptive. An encampment on a university campus, by its very nature, is not disruptive. It's not, unless you physically go to the campus. And even then, they're occupying space on these lawns. When you occupy a city of Ottawa and are constantly honking your horns for all hours of the day for, weeks at a time, that's actually disrupting people's lives. And I don't even have a really problem with that. I would have that tactic, if people were supporting Palestine and engaging in that kind of a protest or an occupation in Ottawa, I would have no issue with that. I would have no problem with it. When you're just a bunch of oafs and you want this country to be more reactionary and fascist than it is currently, then yes. I have more of an issue with that. But the discrepancy is really massive, isn't it? When a university says disrupt something, they mean like disrupt the taxi space with something like Uber, or disrupt the hotel space with something like Airbnb. Not disrupting the Israel myth. We don't want any of that. So that was Calgary. There's images coming out of, I believe, Penn as well. No, that's not what I want. Just look at them all. Look at this shit. This is more footage from Penn. I got it. I got it. This is a few hours earlier. This is faculty members sitting on the intersection of 34th and Walnut Streets, preventing police vans and trucks from entering campus. Shortly after this video, they were led away by the police.
Free Palestine! Faculty with students! Free Palestine! Faculty with students! Free Palestine! Faculty with students! Free Palestine! Faculty! Free Palestine!
So, that's two incidents. That's Penn and Calgary, just over the last couple of nights. The stormtroopers going home after a long day's work. Do they really think this is going to work? I mean, that's the ultimate question for me. Yeah, it's like everything that our sort of ruling class has been doing to sort of deal with this will simply, if we just rest it, I've tweeted things to this effect. If we just arrest everyone, if we just arrest every student, we'll ban TikTok. We'll ban TikTok. We'll arrest all the students. We'll make it illegal to criticize Israel. We'll turn it into a form of hate speech to criticize Israel. Surely this will accomplish what we want to accomplish. It will just go back to business as usual. I love when people come in crying in advance. Yeah. I don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it. These are the supposed anti-Semitic slogans we're told about. Yeah, exactly. This is it. These are the violent, scary climates that we're seeing on these college campuses. Abby broke Piers Morgan last night on Hamas. I respect Abby so much. It's I feel almost bad that she has to subject to herself to that repeatedly. I know she was on the other day with that Israeli spokesperson guy. And who are the people that they're selecting to be their spokespeople? They just look like ghouls. It's so weird, isn't it? Is that what you're talking about? Because I guess, was she on again? I didn't realize that. Let me check. I hate using Instagram on web just does not fucking work. I'm not logged in. I don't know what my login is. Yeah, she was on debating that son of Hamas guy, and that guy looked like such a ghoul. It's not up on YouTube yet. I literally just can't look at the Instagram footage because it's I'm not logged in. It's on her Twitter as well. Okay. Okay, thank you, Kijiji Genie.
What should they do? I reject the premise of Israel's genocide. Now, to your point, Piers, about what should they do about Hamas, I reject the premise of Israel's genocide. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization and they need to be eradicated. Of course, that's not true. And I think that we can both agree.
What do you mean that's not
it's
true?
An impossible task. It's not true that something needs to be done about Hamas. I don't agree with that framework and the parameters of that debate.
Why?
Because Israel's been committing ethnic cleansing and genocidal policies against the Palestinians for 70
But Hamas literally
years.
has
and
a
as
charter.
I reiterated
But Abby,
before,
hang on. Hamas literally has a stated charter of the elimination of Israel. That is the purest personification of a publicly stated policy of genocide.
That's not genocide. That's a country.
That's not true. Their revised charter says that they actually recognize the existence of the Israeli state among 1967 borders. There's no symmetry between the two sides. It's complete asymmetrical mass slaughter of women and kids.
And even just saying you think Israel should be abolished is not genocide. That's a country.
Women and kids. They did. You say there's no symmetry. There's an absolute symmetry.
But there's no symmetry. There's no symmetry between an occupying, colonizing force and the people that they're occupying and colonizing. You could obviously make the same argument that preempted October 7th, that it was a declaration of war to siege Gaza. to prevent aid from getting in, to shoot people that stray too far out, that are fishing, that can't go get medical aid and are sentenced to death within Gaza. Is that not a declaration of war? Is it not a declaration of war to violate international law, to maintain a brutal fascist military dictatorship in the West Bank? These all preempted October 7th. So it just keeps going back and back to what is the root of actual violence, Piers.
Okay.
Pierce is an oaf. Again, I feel somewhat bad for Abby that she has to do this. But I mean, I think on some level, I wouldn't want to do it. I would not want to go and talk to this guy and make these kind of arguments on there. I think on some level, it is, you know, that message getting out there is a good thing. I mean, moving past this whole like condemning Hamas thing and like this nonstop 7 months into this brutal violence and saying there's a symmetry again, like even pointing out people that died on October 7th and talking about the tragedy of that and the horror of that. There's still no symmetry. There's no symmetry between one military operation that took place in which people died versus a 7-month campaign of mass slaughter, destroying an entire city, committing massacre after massacre after massacre for 7 months. There is no symmetry of that, even if you take all the horror stories of October 7th and agree that they're true. Even if you agree that they're true, there's still no symmetry whatsoever between that happening and the response to that. And I think pointing that out as well is that like this whole idea of like there was a ceasefire before October 7th, it was a declaration of war, and like this is just the war. I think that's a framing that's really important to promote as well on these mainstream media platforms also. Like it's a declaration of war when you occupy someone, when you occupy people. These settlements, these illegal settlements, those are declarations of war. Keeping people in an open air prison, that's a declaration of war. You know? Assassinating civilians, nurses, little kids, intentionally maiming people when they march up to a prison fence that's keeping them kept in this small little area, and then you massacre them, that's a declaration of war. And that's where the asymmetry is. The asymmetry is like who's allowed to participate in this conflict and who is always defending themselves and who doesn't get this blanket of protection of like self-defense. So I'm glad that someone's out there like making this case. Again, I feel somewhat bad that she has to go on this show. It doesn't seem very pleasant.
Now, to your point, Piers, about...
And yet, saying Israel shouldn't exist is not a call for genocide. It is not. Like you're talking about a country. Like when Rhodesia, like people are pointing out, when Rhodesia ceased to exist, that was not a genocide. That was not a genocide of Rhodesians. That's this whole thing of like describing this as this ancient conflict. You know, Biden's whole thing about the ancient hatreds or whatever. What is it? The ancient desires. Or David Lammy in the UK was talking about the other day. Why are we so caught up in this ancient conflict? It's literally not ancient. It's not ancient whatsoever. We're just talking about a country. Countries and borders change all the time. It's happened numerous times in our lifetime. It's not ancient. 1949 is not ancient. Joe Biden is older than this ancient conflict that we're talking about here. Yeah, America shouldn't exist. Canada shouldn't exist. We're not talking about genocide. The Middle East has always been at war. Let him figure it out. Yeah, and like the whole thing about the ancient hatreds as well, like we've been talking about, anti-Semitism and the Holocaust is a European issue. It's not the Middle. It wasn't the Middle East that perpetrated these pogroms, that perpetrated the Holocaust. It was Europeans with the assistance of North Americans. Here's a Chomsky as well.
That, in the course of time, Israel should no longer exist. Well, actually, I happen to agree with that too. In fact, so do a lot of people in Israel, the ones who think there should be a single democratic state. That's not calling for wiping anyone out. Actually, there are two countries that are not only calling for some nation not to exist, but are destroying it, namely the U.S. and Israel. That's their position with regard to the Palestinians. And they're not just saying it.
We can talk about the paper shredder next.
I stress, they're not just saying it, they're doing it day by day. That's the meaning of the policies that are going on right before our eyes in Gaza and the West Bank, which we are supporting and paying for. The statement is that, in the course of time, Israel should no longer exist. Well, actually, I happen to agree with that too. In fact, so do a lot of people in Israel, the ones who think there should be a single democratic state. That's not calling for wiping anyone out.
No, it's not.
There are two countries that are not only calling.
It's not. Calling for a single democratic state is not calling for genocide. That's just, and like we talked about repeatedly, I talked about this with Alex in the podcast last night. Just acknowledging that there's not there's no real possibility for a two-state solution. Like, that's not a call for genocide. That's just recognizing reality. Listen to what Israel's own ruling class has to say. They don't want a two-state solution. They're not interested in that. All these settlements since '67 have ensured that this solution is not possible. This is quite deliberate. So when you say, I don't think there should be a two-state solution, I don't think it's possible to have a two-state solution, like Hamas, funny Freudian slip there, like Abby was pointing out in that clip with Piers Morgan, even in the Hamas charter, it says it recognizes an Israeli state on those 67 borders, but even going back to those borders is almost an impossibility at this point. So saying it's no longer possible, Israel's not interested in it, it's no longer possible because of these settlements, that's just recognizing the basic reality of the situation. And it's not calling for anyone's genocide. It's just recognizing the reality. For anything to move forward, there's got to be a single state, a single secular democratic state where everyone can live, where Jews have lived for centuries. Yeah, and look what's happening in the West Bank right now. You say they've expanded so far beyond that and built up fortresses, and look what's happening in the West Bank right now. It's like, and when you say two-state solution, that's what you're talking about. That's this hypothetical state. That's what it's going to look like. Demilitarized. And just recognizing that's just being realistic. That's just taking a materialist view. It's not calling for anyone's genocide. But when Zionists and Israelis say, we think that there should be only one country, Israel, and it should be Israel from the river to the sea, that actually is a call for genocide. As always, it's always a confession. The accusation is always a confession. So there's just this UN vote. There was just this UN vote to grant new privileges to Palestinians at the UN. This is how the Israeli ambassador to the UN responded.
You are shredding the UN Charter.
It's actually you.
With your own hands.
Sorry.
Shredding the UN. You are shredding the UN Charter with your own hands.
That's such an ultimate encapsulation of Israel and the way they interact with the world and engage with the world. It's him doing it. It's him doing it and saying at the same time, you are doing this with your own hands. It's you that's doing this. As he's putting it in his shredder and stuff like, no, sir, it's you. It's actually you. It's actually you that's doing it. Those are literally your hands, sir. Carrot Top ass country. Yeah, they got props. They got props now. You're making me shave my head and forcing me to become a Nazi. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. You're forcing me to do this.
Yes, yes, that's what you're doing. Shredding the UN Charter. Shame on you.
Just absurd. So silly. The woke UN, the Hamas UN, that's right. The UN is Hamas. Everything is Hamas now. Biden is Hamas, of course. Yes. The most Hamas person there is, Joe Biden. Joe Brandon. What's worse than Hamas? Woke Hamas. That's why they're so afraid of these encampments. Because it's the blue-haired college kids plus Hamas. That's the ultimate boogeyman for the reactionary right. It actually is the entire UN membership allowing the genocide to happen, except for a handful of member states, such as Yemen. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like they have tried to vote several times on ceasefire agreements and resolutions. Like the UN there's been multiple efforts at the UN to stop this, and it's been the United States that's been blocking it. Even if there's plenty of Western countries that agree with that. The UN as an institution has been trying to do whatever it can, and it's been blocked at every turn by the United States. Let me find this Al Jazeera video I wanted to watch. Here we go.
Student protests in support of Gaza are growing as new encampments continue to pop up in the midst of the Israeli onslaught on Rafah. What is this global movement really about? And can it achieve its goals? I'm Myriam Francois, and this is The Stream.
We intend to prove that an alternative future is possible.
We will give you time to leave. If you do not leave, you will be arrested.
This is the scene at NYU after police brutally arrested students.
NYPD swept the entire lawn, hauling out piles of students' personal belongings. Here you can see a lot of their tents, backpacks, food.
Y'all ready to beat up on some kids?
Stay plugged in to your students.
Doxing, detention, suspension. These are some of the penalties faced by students protesting for Gaza. With over 2,500 arrests so far in the US alone and multiple injuries, the consequences for students are serious. But there are also some wins for the demonstrators. Deals are being reached and a number of universities have agreed to divest from Israel. So what's next for the movement? Let's hear from those at the heart of it. From Dallas, Texas, Maysam El-Ghazali, a student at Emory University and executive board member of Emory Students for Justice in Palestine. Kendall Gardner, a student at Oxford University in England, who is a member of Oxford Action for Palestine. And Christopher Lacovetti, a PhD student at the University of Chicago, where he organizes with Students for Justice in Palestine. Welcome to you all. Last week, we aired our first episode on the global student movement for Gaza. This is a comment from one of our viewers. The establishment couldn't give the movement a better push and fuel than by sending violent cops on peaceful protesters. This force is unstoppable. It has become a global fight of this generation, a symbol of rebellion that global majority can identify with. There is no coming back. Maysam, I want to ask you about your campus encampment, which was met with some fairly serious violence. Why do you think that is? And do you connect that to other struggles that you're engaged in, for example, that with regards to Cop City?
Yes, 100% I do. Just to provide some broader context, so Emory University invests in a program called GALI, and this stands for the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange Program. And in this program, cops have been sent, actually, Atlanta Police Department officers have been sent to Israel to train with the IDF. These are the Israeli Defense Forces, which are committing atrocities on the ground, facilitating the apartheid, the ethnic cleansing, and the genocide of Palestinians right now. And our very own Atlanta Police Department officers have trained with these people, the IDF. And we definitely think that is contributing to the extra-legal, brutal violence that we are witnessing on campus, that we are being met in their police response to situations that are already completely calm and nonviolent. Furthermore, we definitely connect these struggles with the struggles of stopping Cop City. Once again, to provide some context, Cop City is a $90 million project in Atlanta, $65 million of that, which is coming from the pockets of Atlanta taxpayers. And this is a program which is going to establish basically a mock city in the Wolani Forest, which is near Atlanta. And it's going to take up about 65 acres of that forest land, and it's going to provide a mock city for these already extra militarized cops to train in and basically further cultivate that military presence in Atlanta that the Atlanta Police Department already have.
Thanks.
And yeah, so obviously, yeah, on Thursday morning, April 25th, we were met with 3 different police departments: the Emory Police Department, the Atlanta Police Department, and then the GSP, the Georgia State Patrol, who brought in their state troopers to supposedly de-escalate a situation which, like I already mentioned, was by all reports completely nonviolent and peaceful.
Yeah.
And their response included, tasing students, shooting tear gas at our feet. I had tear gas shot literally right below me. It was very hard to breathe. We were tackled, we were assaulted, all for protesting a genocide. And it's honestly cynically ironic that they would meet us with such war tactics when we are just trying to protest a war which has resulted in a genocide of innocent civilians in Palestine.
Thanks, Maysam. Christopher.
And according to Hillary Clinton, these are just like stupid college kids that just don't know what they're talking about, don't know about history. All these people, what do they want? They don't even know why they're there. They're not articulate. They're not talking to us. They're stupid. They're basically Nazis. Like everything that has been said about these kids, that's just so completely fraudulent.
Your encampment was also met with some violence.
Of de-escalating by pulling up to the function with full military kit and rifles. Exactly.
An interesting tactic with regards to your conversation with the police. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I wouldn't call it a tactic exactly. What happened is that they waited in a very cowardly way until everybody in the camp was either asleep or gone. And then at about 4:30 in the morning, they stormed in riot gear, maybe 40 or 50 of them, screaming, charging at us, throwing hard objects in every direction, chairs, wood planks, etc., trying to just destroy the camp and suppress the movement as fast as possible. But so what essentially happened after that is that a small group of us managed to sort of form a line and hold it just outside the quad at the center of campus where the camp had been. And over time, this was probably around 5 a.m. Over time, we started getting more and more support. People started showing up in numbers, and the cops failed to act quick enough to stop us. And eventually, they set up a barrier and tried to push us out, and we were able to hold them off. And it was in that context, while we were standing there in this sort of, I guess, standoff with the cops for hours, that I was asking them, basically, this is the reality of Gaza. It's a reality of 2 million people in a ghetto, being systematically starved, brutalized, annihilated, every university destroyed, every hospital bombed, mass graves underneath hospitals discovered. 40% of even the farmable land is gone, and the entire population's on the brink of starvation. So my question to them really was, can you really look at yourself and continue following orders to suppress the only viable national movement against this genocide right now? And can you really look at your kids' faces, knowing how ashamed of you they're going to be after you continue doing these things? And I was trying to express to them that the difference between them and us is that every genocide depends not just on
is it that guy?
Like Netanyahu, as Democrats want to claim. It depends on a whole network of complicity, a network of implicated people who, in some degree or another, agree to go along with the orders they're given, agree to go along with
I think you might be right.
Prevailing societal currents dictated by those in power.
Kendall, can I ask you, somewhat conversely, Oxbridge seems to be taking a relatively soft touch so far. So it might be perceived that Oxbridge students are just having a bit of a jolly on the lawn. How do you ensure that the authorities take your stance seriously?
Yeah, so first of all, as you can tell from my voice, I am an American, and so I'm very acutely aware that the policing contexts in the US and the UK are extraordinarily different. However, the UK police are still a colonial entity. They still cannot be trusted, and I still do not have confidence or faith that they will not escalate on us. So that's something that we're taking seriously every single day. Our encampment is not a jolly space. Every moment of every day, we are thinking about Rafah, and that in and of itself makes this a space that is full of tension, that is subjected to intense hostility by people outside of the encampment. Maybe that's not cops for us, but there have certainly been people that we have needed to kind of get our security team to deal with. Yeah. And we see our role in this moment as kind of bringing ourselves into a global wave. By launching Oxbridge encampments, we are showing the world that the students aren't going anywhere, and that we will not stand aside as our comrades in the US are brutalized, are thrown on the concrete, are having riot gear and tanks brought upon them. My alma mater, Tulane, brought tanks out on its students. And Oxbridge
the
is
real
here.
tankies.
We are going to globalize this movement. Yeah. We are not going anywhere.
Thanks,
and
Kendall.
We are acutely aware that we will need to do what we have to do to get the university to take us seriously, so that we can have sincere and intense negotiations.
Well, the University of Barcelona has broken all institutional and academic ties with Israel. Trinity College Dublin has pledged to cut ties with Israeli companies. Meanwhile, in the US, several encampments, including Brown and Northwestern, have agreed to either de-escalate or dismantle on the basis of negotiations with their universities. Here is the University of California announcement.
After 8 long hours of negotiation yesterday, we have decided that we have gotten to an agreement that robustly meets our demands, which led to the dissolution of this encampment today.
Dr. Manger, we're all very scared now using that kind of language.
Letter to the people of Gaza and to the people of Palestine.
Maysam, are these agreements to negotiate a win for the movement?
So yeah, let's be clear. Definitely,
we all feel unsafe now
with our university administrations that discuss how to reach our demands, disclose, divest, and protect these students as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. Those are obviously very good and very crucial first steps. But we have to keep in mind, ultimately, these are our demands. We want our university administrations to disclose all financial investments, divest from all Israeli
like we've been talking about, total mirror to the anti-apartheid movement,
the ethnic cleansing and the genocide of Palestinians. And we want our university administrations to provide complete protection and amnesty to all these students being unjustly arrested in these protests. So I would stay away from calling these negotiations an absolute win, because simply having a dialogue on how to quickly and most effectively reach these demands of ours,
snipers
that
are
is the
tired.
extent of our negotiations. But as far as settlements, we are not going to settle for anything. And I repeat, anything that is less than these three demands that we have demanded, because ultimately we have to keep in mind our goal here is the freedom of the Palestinian people. We cannot stop and we cannot rest until they are free from an apartheid state which suppresses them through systemic racism, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. So the true success will be when our demands are reached. And
It's true, Old Dutch. If we actually had a left that was like building power,
Senator Bernie Sanders is one of many
perhaps someone could do that.
comparisons with the protests against the war in Vietnam in the 1970s. With media coverage so polarized, are the protests misunderstood? Here's Professor Afua Hirsch.
The media in particular is not well equipped to understand the seriousness of student protests, because our media discourse is so obsessed with formal political power, with political parties, elections, legislation, policymakers, lobbyists.
The fit is really something else, huh, Jamie?
To depict any grassroots movement as an outburst of chaos, of these anarchical forces trying to disrupt everyday life for no reason other than some vague grievance. That couldn't be further from the truth. These protests are organized, they're coordinated, they have been almost all peaceful, and they have a clear set of demands which are achievable. So the fact that they're disruptive is also a misunderstanding, because that is the point. Students often feel they don't have much formal political power or economic power, but what they do have is
studio personalities just like the Wildcrats.
Wider attention to a cause that they feel, and I think many of us as faculty and in the wider world also feel, are questions of life and death.
Christopher, a recent
It's a powerful
poll
look.
showed that 53% of adults felt that
With the sneakers as well.
administrator's decision to suspend and expel some pro-Palestinian protesters was about right or not harsh enough. And the older people get, the harsher they think the punishment should be. Are these protests misunderstood?
Of course. In some cases, I think misunderstood is too generous a word. In others, though, I think, yeah, because of how cynical, how selective media coverage has been, there are a lot of adults who, sincerely in good faith have no reason not to believe that we're not just a group of some sort of hodgepodge of anti-Semites, unreasonable anarchists, people that are just rebelling for the fun of it without knowing what we're doing, ... I mean, I gave an interview which went somewhat viral, which was the occasion for me being invited here. And I'm glad that that interview went viral because I think there were important things communicated in it. But I also find it sort of depressing because that type of interview could and should have been already given countless times by countless students around this country and across Europe. Like, there's nothing I said in that interview that thousands of students on every campus would not say if they were ever given 4 minutes of airtime on a camera. And the only reason that happened in my case is because I was involved in a police standoff, and so they were filming live for once. But yeah, I mean, the coverage has been so defamatory at worst and carefully curated at best that every time you give an interview and you try to communicate the gravity of what's happening in Gaza, the urgency of this moment, the collective responsibility we feel as taxpayers in a country in the US and the UK, who are extensively involved in and in many ways presiding over this genocide. This stuff gets completely written out of the narrative in favor of fluffy stories about like campus tensions and free speech and whatever else. That is not the point. Those children who are starving to death right now are the point.
Well, Kendall, a recent poll by Harvard Center for American Political Studies found that 2/3 of voters today believe that it's not safe to be openly Jewish on university campuses. Similar views have been echoed in the UK. As a Jewish person yourself, is this a fair reflection of the situation on campuses?
Absolutely not. And as Christopher just pointed out, I'm also here because I went viral as a Jewish person speaking for Palestine. And let me be clear in this moment, that should never have had to happen. No one should be deferring to Jewish people to be the voices for Palestinian liberation. And I have a lot of complicated feelings about the role that I'm taking on as a Jewish person in this movement. Because people, for some reason, still think that they need to defer to Jewish voices to believe that a genocide should end. And that is
huge respect for her making this
our
point.
encampment is a safe space for all people, but especially Jewish people. We held a teach-in on anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism yesterday that I led. We're holding a Shabbat on Friday. We've been having productive conversations that I think need to be having, that should have been had publicly for a long time, about what anti-Semitism actually looks like when it's not being instrumentalized to brutalize the people of Palestine. And as a Jewish person, what I'm most worried about for my own safety is the way that anti-Semitism by the alt-right, by right-wing nationalists, by neo-Nazis, is not even being focused on, because instead those people are being invited to Israel to support the genocide of the Palestinian people. And so if we want to have a real conversation about Jewish safety, what that means is committing to the liberation of Palestine. And so many people refuse to understand that, refuse to engage in it because of a media narrative that is being propped up by our governments in order to support their complicity in an imperial settler colonial project that Jewish people have always been opposed to. Ever since Zionism has existed, anti-Zionists have existed.
For many young people, joining the movement for the support of Palestinian liberation has also challenged their wider views about society and authority. Listen to this.
I saw a video of Bibi Netanyahu talking, and if that motherfucker isn't as American as apple pie, like he was like, yeah, we're gonna go into Rafah and we're gonna take over, like the way I just said that. And seeing that kind of shifted my perspective, because I feel like a lot of people are seeing what's happening right now with Gaza as America doing Israel's bidding. But the reality is, Israel is an American colony, period. And we can draw direct parallels between the way that America expanded west and what is happening right now to Palestinians. The process of land seizure, divide and conquer practices, incentivizing settlers to move into occupied territories. America has perfected the
settler colonialism.
And I think it's really interesting how it kind of gets to be like, oh, we're just getting our strings pulled by Israel, blah, blah, blah.
Maysam, universities have spent many years now talking about the need for decolonization, for anti-racism. What do you say to those who say decolonization isn't theoretical?
I mean, decolonization here, this is another reason why the movements have spread so globally so quickly, because everybody is seeing that Israel is simply a neo-colonial state. And that is for those who don't even want to define colonization as something that has ever left. I mean, really, like, we are seeing it live and strong in Israel right now, in their subjugation of the Palestinian people. They treat them like second-class citizens in their own homes, on their own lands. They are subjected to different legal systems, different educational systems, simply on the basis of their race. It is textbook definition of apartheid, and it is the textbook definition of colonization.
Christopher, I want to ask you about this idea of awakening, and Kendall, I'll come to you straight.
This is why Hillary had the little media freak out yesterday. Exactly. And like, it's, you see how absurd it is to like frame these kids as being like ignorant when you actually hear them speak. My boomer Canadian parents not understanding settler colonialism is an endless source of frustration. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have experienced things like that. I mean, I've talked about it a couple of times, but like my grandmother, my granny, who's a wonderful lady, loved her very much, but she would talk about like she would say things like old stock Canadians and say that kind of, use that kind of language, which was so confusing. Because it's like her parents were literally not born in Canada. You know, her parents were not born in Canada, but she would talk about like old stock Canadians versus these people who don't quite qualify. You know? You got that's that kind of settler mentality though, right? We belong here. We've always been here. Too many people have the relationship inverted. That's what borders on the anti-Semitism. I think I agree, and we need to push back on that. Although I do understand why people get the idea that it's that relationship is inverted, because it feels a lot of the time like Western politicians are going against their own interests. It feels a little bit like that. So I do get why people have that reaction. When it feels like, Western politicians are just at the beck and call of this country, and devote their whole careers to defending everything that they do, and you see the role of like the Israel lobby and AIPAC and all that stuff in ensuring these candidates like stay in power. But yeah, I do think it is still important, regardless of that, to talk about this colonial relationship. Not even that it's really an American colony, but it's an extension of America itself. If you think someone in power is going to go against their interests, you haven't identified their real interests. So that's a good way of looking at it, yeah. I actually don't like this line of argumentation. They're allies, but Israel is not historically subordinate in all ways to America. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I think it's kind of like an illusion. I think you have this relationship where kind of it appears as if there's this certain measure of independence that Israel has. And, perhaps that's part of that is true. But I think ultimately it exists, and America stands by Israel, not because this relationship is inverted, but because no matter how genocidal the Israeli ruling class acts, they need Israel to continue existing in its current context to be their kind of their military base in the Middle East, and to fracture the entire Middle East, to uphold the petrodollar. So even if it might look like that or relationship's inverted, they'll put up with Israeli leaders acting all kinds of ways because that's how important Israel is to the United States interests. Joe Biden said it himself. Remember? He said it himself. If there was not an Israel, we'd have to go out and invent an Israel to protect our interests in the region. So that's why I think they'll put up with a lot. And it might look like insubordination, it might look like independence, but ultimately it still is. It's an American military base. It's an American colonial outpost in the Middle East. The main point those kids made that is being ignored by the media is the racial aspect of this. Israeli Jews have always been seen as white Europeans by the Arab Palestinians. They felt it unfair that their land was taken when Arabs are one of the few peoples to never discriminate against the Jews. Yeah, and people have been pushing back on this idea that Israel is some form of white supremacy too, and they'll point to the existence of like Mediterranean or Middle Eastern Israelis. But ultimately, again, white supremacy is not necessarily about the skin pigmentation of the people that are involved with it, though, right? It's like, what are you upholding? If you're upholding the Western colonialism, if you're upholding the economic and geostrategic interests of the predominantly white Western countries, then you're upholding white supremacy. Like, that's colonialism. Colonialism is like a part of white supremacy. It's part of like white Western European global domination. It's literally very simple. Herzl and Jabotinsky and others openly stated it. Israel's the eastern wall of the West against the Mongol, barbarian, Oriental, etc., whatever hordes. That's sort of the funny thing when you say, like, oh, it's a settler colony. And they're like, what? It's anti-Semitic to say that. You can't say that. When it's like you look back to Herzl and the founding ideological founders of Israel. And it's like, it's a settler colony. They're very open and honest about this. Always very amusing.
Right after that, the video we just saw sort of suggests there's a kind of wider awakening happening. Is there?
Yes, I think so. And I think that is precisely why we're seeing such extreme forms of neo-McCarthyite repression and police violence right now, is because the political class and business class and corporate media can see very clearly that the ground is shifting. And that young people in increasingly large numbers of all races, religions, backgrounds, etc., are seeing what the Global South has been saying about the United States for decade after decade after decade, which is that despite its self-image as some sort of a generous benefactor to the world, it is not just an enabler of genocide in Gaza, it is an imperial menace throughout huge portions of the world that behaves in exploitative and brutal fashion that topples governments at will whenever they cease to do its bidding, that imposes vicious sanctions regimes on countries that refuse or resist regime change efforts. And so when we talk about the case of Palestine, Zionists will often accuse us of singling out Israel as if it's some singular evil in the world. And I think that what the person in the TikTok said is very important in this regard. Israel does not control the U.S., and Israel is not the only evil actor in the world. Israel is, as Nixon once put it, one of America's cops on the beat in the
There we
Middle
go.
East. It is our outpost. It was formerly Britain's, now it's ours, and we are invested in it as an outpost to further our own imperial interests, and large portions of the EU are going along with this as well. But in this sense, there's not simply an Israeli occupation of Palestinian land and people. There's a U.S.-Israeli occupation, and that has been the case for more than half a century. There's not just Israeli apartheid, there's U.S.-Israeli apartheid. And now there's not just Israeli genocide in Gaza, it's U.S.-Israeli genocide. And so in this sense, to confront the reality of Gaza in this moment is to confront so much about both the colonial foundations and the imperial operations of the United States. And that is the reckoning that I think the political class is very afraid of, because it cuts much deeper than just stopping one genocide or getting one ceasefire or something like that. It cuts to the very core of decolonization here in Palestine and the dismantling of an imperial regime that has been a global nightmare for so much of the world for more than half a century.
Kendall, I want to bring you back in. There was something you wanted to come back on, and I also want you to tell us a little bit about what these encampments represent.
Yeah, so I'd like to add to these points. This is a British-American imperial project. Oxford men wrote the Balfour Declaration. And part of what our encampment is trying to do is to really show how flimsy this decolonization rhetoric is in academic spaces. Our encampment sits on the lawn of the Pitt Rivers Museum, which is a museum of colonial atrocity. The museum has taken human remains off of display and still has them in storage. Decolonization is not theoretical, it is material. And that has implications for our campuses. What our encampment represents to us is a sort of reclamation, a territorial reclamation in many ways, of what this university is supposed to be for its students. And I think that what that represents on a global scale is our solidarity with these territorial decolonial movements that are happening all across the globe, that have been happening all throughout history, about what it actually means to decolonize. It means listening to the liberatory demands of colonized people, giving those people the right of return to their land. These are material things. And the political class does not want to engage with that because it has material implications. And it means that the status quo will have to change. The hierarchies that we have in place will have to fall. And that is what the Oxford is trying to really hit home in the UK as well, because this is the imperial core. This is where the Mandate of Palestine was created. And the University of Oxford encampment is not going to go anywhere until that idea is reckoned with.
Well, thank you for that, Ken.
I mean, like, say what you will about Al Jazeera. People can try to discredit what happens on Al Jazeera. Point it's like it's Qatari state media. It has that kind of like element to it. But like these discussions are not like there's what American or Western media outlet is having this kind of discussion and having these like students come on to speak their minds like this and completely outline and articulate this viewpoint like this. It's just not happening anywhere else. These kids do seem based in Marxist pills as well, and that's something that people need to lean into as well, and I hope they do, because they're trying to use this kind of Red Scare language to kind of scare people away from this. Oh, they're being radicalized, they're reading Mao, they're Marxists. And it's like, yeah, that's like the more that we agree with that and the more that we self-identify in these ways, we take away the power. Just like you take away power from people to call you an anti-Semite or whatever, when you refuse to back down and you refuse to kind of equivocate and you refuse to let that, shake you from where you are, from what your analysis is. We can reclaim these terms as well and take away the power that people in the media and politics have to wield these kinds of terms around to discredit people and discredit movements. Yeah, it's like RT, exactly. It's exactly why RT, I think, was really valuable. Yeah, yes, it's going to have a certain slant in some areas. Yeah, okay, we get it. But it's still bringing on, like RT was bringing on Abby Martin 10 years ago. giving her a show. I'm sure, I don't want to speak for Abby, I'm sure she would have been happy to have a show on CNN, but that was not an option. Or the same thing with Press TV, the same thing with Telesur, all these kinds of like state media outlets. You have more arrests outside NYC as well.
This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give.
And support my work on this program as well.
Gaza encampment in the country was launched at the New School here in New York City Wednesday evening. Nearly 24 professors and lecturers pitched tents inside the lobby of the New School's main building on Fifth Avenue. They named their encampment after the Palestinian writer and poet Rafat El-Hariri, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza in December. The faculty encampment was launched several days after the police raided a student encampment at the New School and arrested more than 40 students.
Thank you, Dr. Maggot, for the gifted sub. It is insane how quickly they shut down RT in our freedom of the press world. Exactly. It really is. Yes.
After the university administration called on the NYPD to clear the encampment. In a statement Thursday, the New School said it would not pursue criminal charges against the student protesters who were arrested. It also said it would be reactivating a college committee to examine the issue of divestment. However, on Thursday evening, 12 people were arrested outside the New School as the faculty encampment continued inside. Last night, I got a text as the protest was heating up. I was walking my dog, Zazu. We raced over to the New School, and I met up with Democracy Now! Fellow Hannah Ilias, and we started reporting and recording. Of Democracy Now! We're standing in front of the New School. There are posters in the windows. Faculty encampment, the first in the country. The posters say, 40K people dead, you arrest kids instead. All eyes on Rafah. But the slogan of the New School here on the window is radical democracy. 2 professors are here who are part of the encampment.
My name is Hala Malak. We have a few demands. The first one is we want the New School
Hang on, I'll be right
to
back,
divest,
folks.
From the 13 companies that are that they have investments in weapons and manufacturing that are part and complicit in this war. So demilitarization of divestment, basically, of the school. Our second demand is that we would like all cops to be off campus indefinitely, and we also want the school to cut all ties with the NYPD.
My name is Sunil Sansgiri. I'm a part-time faculty in the Culture and Media Department. I'm here because I teach a class on decolonization, and there is no better way to put into place the knowledge that students learn in our classrooms into practice. In the encampment that we see sweeping across the country, we know that the state repressive police forces are lock in step with the larger U.S. imperialist presence around the globe, and specifically with what's happening in Palestine. And so we understand that what we're doing here, the calls for divestment, are directly and materially impacting an end to the genocide. And for us as faculty, for the state violence that our students were subjected to and traumatized because of, we could not stand on the sidelines any longer. We knew we had to step up. Many faculty across the country have risked so much, and what we're doing here is calling for all faculty across the country to step up, to risk more, and to escalate, because we have to get all war profiteers out of our universities.
My name is Clara Mattei. I'm an associate professor of economics at the NSSR. I'm out here because this is the struggle of the moment everyone has to be in. I must say that these encampments are places where culture actually explodes, emerges, connections are made, and ultimately this is a fight against capitalism and the violence of capitalism at large.
Thank you. We're standing in front of the police van where they put a young black man who they arrested. Then scores of people came, professors and students, to demand that he be let go. They sat in front of the police van, and now scores of police have come to arrest the people that are sitting in front of the van.
My name is Krisa Pugh, and I'm assistant professor of sociology here at the New School. And I'm sitting here because as I was walking to support our students in the encampment, the faculty encampment, they arrested one of my black students, refused to tell me why they were arresting him, and promptly threw him in this van. And I am not going to stand up and let this van go until I let my black student out of that van. And he was arrested for supporting Palestinian Gazans. 40,000 have died, and you're arresting this kid?
There are now dozens of police here. We're right next to Parsons and the New School. Parsons has a plaque on it that says this is the site of W.E.B. Du Bois's Crisis magazine and the headquarters of the NAACP, a place where Zora Neale Hurston and Langston Hughes and County Cullen and others wrote. They're arresting a young black man. The crowd has been asking, many of them professors and students here at the New School, why is he being arrested?
Why will you not speak to us about our students? What is his name? I'm a professor here. I deserve to know who my student is that you have in this van.
I'm Natasha Leonard, and I'm a faculty member at the New School of Social Research. I'm here to support my students. I'm here to stand in solidarity with other faculty members, other staff members who want to see an end to genocide. We're also calling profoundly for cops off and away from campus, and this is what you see when you keep standing armies of NYPD in and near a campus. A small incident, and I didn't see exactly what happened, but an incident has led now to many people being put at risk. A young man, a young black man, is in police custody. None of this would happen if we didn't have police ready because of the completely unnecessary actions of our administration in calling the police in on our students, like so many administrations around the country calling police in on a peaceful protest for the end to the genocide in Gaza.
Your name and why are you being arrested?
Being arrested for trying to protect a student at the university. I'm a staff member here. This is shameful. This all started because a student at this university was arrested with no cause. The police refused to give an answer, and now they've arrested more students.
I'm sure this is all going to calm down any day now.
Are you a professor?
Tell us your name.
They just keep arresting people. I'm sure any day now this is all going to calm down.
The person we were shouting to, who was being put into a police car, was Julieta Salgado. Her hands were zip tied.
For sure, look at the
behind her
resources.
back.
I know.
But just before
It's like
they put her
unfathomable.
into the car, a police officer unbuttoned her shirt and put her hands
What the
up and
fuck?
down her chest over her bra in full public view.
Why did you undress me?
A total of 12 people were arrested on the streets outside the New School last night. Special thanks to Democracy Now! Video fellow Hannah Ilias and Hani Massoud. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today.
What the hell was that? I see Canada abstained from the UN vote granting Palestinian territories new rights. That's good. This is disgusting. Seriously, like assaulting her before the arrest, before the full arrest. The DNC might go partially online to avoid protests. Like, what the fuck? How are they going to justify that? And again, I thought the whole thing was like, you got to go back to work. No more online. No more working from home. We got to go back to work. What are these lazy kids? They don't want to work. They don't want to go into work. These lazy millennials and Zoomers. No one wants to go to work anymore. No more working from home. And now they're saying like, oh, we might take our convention and put it online to avoid protest. How does that even work? They can't have an online convention. when they have no real actual, now that they've moved past the whole like pandemic thing and have made a big taken pains to show everyone on a number of levels, they can't now go back. Oh, by the way, now we need to go back to having an online convention. I mean, there's going to be protests in Chicago regardless. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. No alert. Just no alert on that raid. Good. Fantastic. My alerts are really working very well lately. Dan, thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. Thank you, Dan. And thank you for the resub as well. Also, no alert. Also, no alert on the resub. Good. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you. Thank you for that. What's going on with the alerts? Literally, people have resubbed today, and it had alerts. Nace0, thank you for the 20 months resub at tier 1 as well. You see it, the numbers going up. The numbers going up, and we got no alerts. Thank you, Up the Reds, for the 27 months of Prime. What the hell's going on? Duh. Max just gave 1,000 subs and there's no alerts. All out of alerts at the alert store. Things have been going really well lately. Like a garden hose, you're going to get like 32 alerts in about 20 minutes. If you can, though, please do subscribe to the show, even though it doesn't have alerts. I guess I can still say thank you. The number's still going up. The number is still going up, and I can still thank everyone for their alerts. If you can, please do subscribe to this program. I'm a mere 43 subs away from getting to 50, and as I was saying yesterday, I have a.
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Max,
test the alerts by resubbing.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Max, thank you for the gifted sub as well.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Maybe the 20 sub one will work. Exactly. We don't know until someone tries it. We don't know. Dr. Maggot just continued their sub from Prime gift to tier 1. Thank you, Dr. Maggot, for that. Very much appreciated. And as I mentioned, 42 subs away to get to 50. And who knows if we'll get to 50 today or when that's going to be, but I do have quite a song planned. I do have quite a song planned for the next time I do get to 50. It's going to be a tearjerker. There's not gonna be a dry eye in the house. I have a song planned that's actually foolish for me to do. I have a song planned from literally one of the greatest singers ever. One of the greatest singers to ever do it. And this is how stupid I am. It's obviously Nickelback. This is how stupid I am that I'm going to try and sing one of these songs. But only if we get to 50 subs. As you know, that's the rule. That's the rule. I sing a song when we get to 50 subs. But yeah, please do subscribe. As you know, in order to do this program, I must make the little number at the bottom of the screen go up. Maybe I'll get to 50, maybe not, but I am trying to hit the targets every single day. We do have a little hype train going now. The alerts seem to be fixed. So if you do want to subscribe or gift subs, and if you gift 5 subs or 10 subs, it makes even better alerts, even cooler alerts.
The size of the account.
This is how you remind me of what I really am.
Or 20 subs as well. When someone did give 20 subs yesterday, we had the magnificent and rarely seen and very cool 20 sub alert as well. Thank you, Joe, for the 200 bits. We need to test every alert right now. This is what's important right now. It's very important that we do this. That 20 sub alert was really something else. It was nice to see that yesterday. But we are just taking a little break, and then I'll move on and talk about more serious issues.
Simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Jeremiah, thanks for the 100 bits. Appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I would, as you know, folks, it's just an economic reality. For me, in order to do this show, I must make the little number at the bottom of the screen go up. This is just how it works. You know, I try to do decent sort of like political analysis and interviews and all that kind of good stuff. But ultimately, what I am is a gig slave for the Amazon Corporation. And my goal in life essentially is to just sit here in front of my computer and make this little number at the bottom of the screen go up. That's just the reality of having to do this show. So if you do enjoy this program, if you'd like to tune in, if you like the discourse and the commentary and the analysis and the interviews and all the fun stuff that we do on here day in, day out, please subscribe if you can. We got 27 more subs to go.
Count on me. You're gonna have good old
27 to go to get to the goal. 41 to get to the secondary goal of singing a little song. I've had it with that motherfucking number at the bottom of that motherfucking screen. It's seriously though, seriously. As I've said many times, I would really prefer not to have to worry about the number. If it was up to me, I wouldn't take these interludes and I wouldn't have to do this whole shtick. It's just purely the reality of doing this show. That's just the reality that I'm faced with. If I want to do the show, the number's got to go up. That's just how it goes. Did you know Rob is close personal friends with Vijay Prashad? Even asked him about gooning. I've asked a renowned scholar and historian and journalist Vijay Prashad about Steely Dan, Avatar, and gooning. That's how serious this show is. That's how serious. Ooh boy. If it rubbed around, this would be a pure singing stream. Have you tried keeping the number at 35? Then you don't have to do anything. I mean, that would be nice. Believe me, there's nothing more painful, Kijiji. There's nothing more painful than clicking the little buttons at the beginning of the stream to make it go back down to 0. Believe me, there's nothing that I would like more than to just leave it. Than to just leave it where it is. My 3 favorite things. That's right. I am a modern Sisyphus. It's very Sisyphean. It's true. My 3 favorite things. You get Steely Dan going on the speaker. You get Avatar going on the TV. And then you get other stuff going elsewhere. You know? You get those 3 things at the same time. The exciting life of a Twitch streamer. Or the eagle liver guy. Yeah, it's more like that. It's chat comes to eat my liver every day in the form of making fun of me for verbal flubs. That's the equivalent of having my liver eaten. The perfect goon sesh. That's right. I've really got to become more of a robe guy, I think. I've been looking at some robes lately. I was looking at one with some pineapples on it. Mistress of Insanity suggests the paisley. I don't know. Anyway, folks, still only... I know it's how exciting it is. It's within grasp. Very cool. Still just a measly 26 subs to get to... Or is that the number? I believe so. I believe so. Still only 26 subs to get to the goal. I know it's exciting for me. It's exciting for you. It's so close. It's within grasp. A measly, minor 26 subs to go. It's unbelievable. Very cool.
You can
I acquired a kimono recently, and it's really nice to wear over underwear and smoke weed in. That sounds fantastic, honestly. Only fact. Thanks very much for gifting a sub. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you. Should Mistress of Insanity get a pretzel or a Cinnabon? I love those Cinnabuns. That's probably what if it was up to me right now, that's probably what I would go with personally, but I don't know what chat thinks. We seem to have a consensus forming. Get gooey with it. Yeah, they have Cinnabon in Canada. I always love when you're in the mall or whatever, and you have the smell of the Cinnabon smell, like down the hall. Does Cinnabons breach the Canadian regime's caffeine limit? I don't know. It's probably just too decadent. It's too enjoyable. It's not that it breaks any specific rules about sugar or anything. It's just like, no, there's too much flavor. It's too sweet. It makes people happy. We got to ban it. Ban this thing. I just don't like it. I don't like seeing people happy. Ban this. Did you guys hear Rob's local Pizza Hut requires Rob to get 50 subs each Friday or they don't serve his son pizza? Don't ask me how this is like legal. I have no idea how that's even possible. I don't even know how it's possible or legal, but that's just the reality. And only 40 subs to go to get there. So that's why I'm not feeling too bad about it today. Should be any moment now. Should be able to get through there any moment. And then you all get a nice little song as well. Large pepperoni pizza, that'll be 23 slubs, sir. We might as well just turn it into a currency, just like a barter system, where I just take my subs that I accumulate every week and I can exchange that for like housing and food, goods and services, etc. The most evil nation on earth, Sweden, is slowly breaking the spirit of my proud Danish people with bags of mini Cinnabuns called giflar. That's how they get you. Those fucking Swedes. Those fucking Swedes, that's how they get you. Ugh. Amazon shits on the horizon. Oh, for sure, yeah. Script. You get the Amazon script. They're going to stop paying me in currency. They're going to pay me in script. That'll be fun. Of course, I thought of the friendship triangle when I saw this. Yeah, no, I've seen... I think I'd like to say we were ahead of the curve. We were ahead of the curve with all the worm god references. Because we were talking about this before the new movie, before any of this stuff. This is RFK on his third term. That's the caption. We were way ahead of the curve on this one. Before the hype.
You can count on
before
me
any of the hype.
Good old Rob to talk you through all this.
I believe Pizza Hut accepts Twitter Cloud as payment. That would be cool if you just got like some privileges. You know, I hit 6 figures the other day, 100K on Twitter. You just start, oh, right this way, sir. Oh my, you get escorted into the club, the restaurant. They're like people sitting at the table. They're like, you have to leave. You have to get off from the table. There's a spot in the corner. You can sit on the floor in the corner. We got to clear this table right away. We got to bust this table right away. Anon, thank you for a gifted sub as well. I appreciate you, Anon. Thank you. Get past the velvet rope, exactly. Yeah, they say with the table up front, they bring in a new table. Exactly. My whole life, I wanted to be a big account. Ugh. So, folks, before we move on here, I have about another hour to go here. I have about another hour to go. It would be good to get to halfway to the sub goal. That would be good before moving on, I think, if possible. Do any other fine folks, do any other brave heroes want to support this program and support the work that I do here on twitch.tv? 24 subs to go. Should be no problem. Should be no problem to get there. But before we move on, are there one or two more brave heroes that would like to help me in my daily quest?
You can count on
to make this little number go up.
Rob to talk you through all this.
Anon, thank you very much. 3 gifted subs from Anon.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk
very,
you
very
through
kind
all
of
this.
you. And Kijiji, oh my goodness, very kind of you. Very generous. Kijiji, thank you so much.
You're gonna have good old Rob to
as soon as
talk you
it
through all
comes
this.
through. Or is it going to do all 5? Who knows with the alerts these
You can
days?
count on me. You're gonna have good old
Good.
Rob to talk you through all this.
Good, let's hear some more.
You can count on me. You're gonna have
Yep.
good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Let's hear 3 more.
You can count on me. You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And then let's hear the other one at the end as well, in addition to that. You've just become an elite member of the Friendship
Or not.
Triangle. Jesus. There's no rhyme or reason to it. That was not 5. It's like, we'll do 3 and then we'll do the batch one. Kijiji, thanks for 5 gifted subs. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Very cool. This community is so supportive. I really, really appreciate it so much. Seriously.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
And Canned Clams 69. Thanks for the gifted sub as well. We got Tanky Guitarist and Leftist Gaming getting gift subs here. Very cool, folks. Well, look here. This seems kind of interesting. We were already talking about this. Here's a video with Rania Khalek on Breakthrough News about this exact subject, about the U.S.-Israel relationship. Who's calling the shots? You can call me Clammy. Okay, I will. Thank you, Clammy. I'll admit, Mike Bailey joining in chat, I marked a bit, ashamed of myself. That's all right, Marty. It's cool. I'm not really familiar with his work as a wrestler, but very cool to get raids from such upstanding and interesting individuals. Okay, so this should be cool. We were just talking about this. It's a good place to throw on this interview by the wonderful Rania Khalek, former guest of the show, friend of the show. Should be interesting.
Is a giant military base, and it's a giant military base that is an extension of U.S. power and U.S. domination. It's an essential element from the point of view of the Pentagon and the White House, an essential element in the U.S. strategy of global
Good timing, because we were just having this conversation.
And so what Israel has been able to do for the United States is it's almost impossible to describe how extensive that has been. It's, whether it was, retraining and training and arming the Guatemalan military back in the 1980s when they were committing genocide against the Mayan people, or providing the atomic bomb to South Africa at the time of the apartheid regime there. But most of all, and beyond any doubt, is the distorting effect, the impact on development in the Middle East itself, where Israel is really an implantation. It's an European implantation in the heart of the Arab world. And it has distorted life and development in that region to the benefit of imperialism.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Khalek, and this is Dispatches. As Israel's genocide in Gaza has horrified the world for nearly 7 months, there are growing discussions in the U.S. around the nature of its relationship with Israel. There are several popular mainstream narratives that have sought to explain this relationship with a discourse centered around shared values, democracy, sympathy for European persecution against Jews throughout history, and a clash of civilizations that imagines a Judeo-Christian culture in need of protection from the barbaric authoritarian Arab masses.
Judeo-Christian is such
Others frame Israel as a nuisance
red flag.
to US elites.
Anyone who uses that
hurts US
phrase
interests in a classic case of the tail wagging the dog through an Israel lobby that pressures and intimidates and throws money around to sway US policy in Israel's favor. But these arguments are flawed and distort the true nature of the relationship. Yes, Israel needs the US, but the US also needs Israel because Israel is an arm of US imperialism, a Western outpost that protects US empire's will in the Middle East. It always has been. The Israel lobby is just an extension of the US military-industrial complex that keeps elected officials in line. And sure, there are sometimes contradictions between Israeli government officials and ruling US elites, depending on which party's in charge. But this doesn't change the general paradigm of Israel as a strategic US investment and a proxy that sustains US global domination in an important region. Meaning the struggle for justice in Palestine is actually a struggle against US imperialism itself. Joining me to discuss this and more is Richard Becker,
which is exactly why I keep making this point,
author of the,
which is that when these like decolonial struggles, I'm trying to land Rania on a good pause face. I'm sorry, Rania. It's exactly why I've been trying to make the point that when these like decolonial struggles, centering Western imperialism, centering American imperialism and colonialism, and when these decolonial struggles start getting linked with decolonial struggles in official enemy states, and thus supporting Western imperialism, that we can't be doing that. I keep kind of making this point. This is my very like tanky thing that I feel like it's important to fixate on, but this is when these movements get wrecked by people that come in and start saying like, yeah, we got to free Palestine just like we need to free Tibet and free Ukraine and free the Uyghurs and free Hong Kong and all these other places as well. Yeah. So it's like we need to oppose Western imperialism here, but we need to support it elsewhere. Like it's incoherent, and this is how this like movement that should have this like anti-imperialist characteristic gets diluted and the energy gets aimed in the wrong direction.
content.
And again, when I talk about this, it's not because I'm a like tanky that just thinks China can do no wrong or whatever it is. But yeah, it's framing the ultimate evil, the ultimate power that's responsible for this violence as Western imperialism, and standing always against that, always centering Western imperialism, and never ever trusting, people that are promoting these imperialist narratives, not even for a moment, not even one iota, ni tantico.
The show, you can also donate below on YouTube. Richard Becker, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a real pleasure to
Did
have
I screw
you
that
on.
up,
I'm
Alexandra?
so
Fuck.
excited to hear your thoughts and analysis based on this wonderful book you wrote, which I've been perusing. It's fantastic. I highly recommend people check it out. Palestine, Israel, and the U.S. Empire. This is the latest edition, so you have some updates post October 7th. But before we get into that, we're recording this on Monday, May 6th. And I say that only because I'm not sure once this comes out, if a Rafah invasion by the Israeli army will have started or not. It seems to be very, very likely that that's going to happen within the coming days, perhaps. And Rafah is, of course, the part of Gaza where over 1 million Palestinians have been sheltering and still getting bombed and dying of starvation and thirst and all of the other things happening in the rest of Gaza, though they were told to evacuate to Rafah. And now this supposed safe zone is, they're once again being told to evacuate. So I'm just curious, before we get into the book, your general thoughts on the current situation, which just seems to get worse and worse as time passes.
Well, it's a looming catastrophe. It already appears to be underway in its first stages, and the concentration of people and the conditions that they're living in are already and have been for several months catastrophic. An Israeli military operation, particularly given the fact that the Israeli military and the political leadership have no interest in the survival of the people. In fact, what they are doing appears to be an attempt to destroy as much of the population of Gaza as possible, either through bombs and mortars or through starvation, disease. But you can see that this is really aimed at eliminating the population, or as much of the population as possible.
Yeah, it's really, really horrifying. I mean, it's just like, I think, you know, we're just about the 7-month point of this horrific genocide. And, you know, I think it's really important to have you on to talk about this specific topic now, because obviously this is the biggest story in the world happening, this genocide in Gaza. It's a moment where people are learning, in some cases for the first time, are learning about Palestine, the colonization of
Congratulations
Palestine,
on getting
Zionist
first, Jay.
And there's a lot of various ways that the mainstream and then even some on the left are explaining the U.S. relationship with Israel, right? Because people see that the U.S. is willing to do anything for Israel. It's willing to send it limitless amount of weapons with no conditions, even if it's committing a genocide. It's willing to use its UN Security Council vote to constantly veto any attempt at accountability or even just like a basic ceasefire. It's willing to protect Israel from from being, you know, Israeli officials from being prosecuted at the International Criminal Court. And I could go on and on and on. You see like every member of Congress, every member, every president of university, you know, is basically like pledging allegiance in many ways to whatever Israel wants to do to Palestinians. And they're willing to deploy police to you know, fire tear gas and rubber bullets at students who are just asking their universities to divest from genocide. All that's to say, a lot of the reasons, a lot of the ways this behavior is explained is either that, you know, Israel and the U.S. have shared values, or I think the more popular version of why the U.S. supports Israel without any condition is the idea of the Israel lobby. And so, Richard, you know, one thing that comes to mind is the very important book by Stephen Walt and John Mearsheimer, which argues that, you know, the power of the Israel lobby, which makes it very politically risky to threaten, you know, any meaningful reductions in U.S. support to Israel, is the reason Israel or U.S. supports Israel. And in fact, Israel's policies, Israel's behavior, in many ways, Israel's existence in the Middle East is actually, you know, bad for the U.S. In many ways. And that's why there has to be this Israel lobby. So I'm rambling now, but that's all to say, we get these different explanations for why the U.S. supports Israel. And I want to ask you to explain from your perspective what it is that actually drives U.S. unconditional support for this settler colony in the Middle East.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that in one respect, the Mearsheimer Walt book is quite useful in showing the, you know, just what the real character is of our so-called representatives. And I don't mean they really are representatives, but you know, they spend most of their time raising money. So if you offer them money, they'll follow you anywhere. And they've done this with the pro-Israel lobby, and it's been allowed to develop political power because it's marching in lockstep with U.S. foreign policy. But I think that the real cause of the vast funding of Israel that goes on from the United States, hundreds of billions of dollars now, and adding up continually, is that from Washington's point of view, Israel is a giant military base, and it's a giant military base that is an extension of U.S. power and U.S. domination. It's an essential element. From the point of view of the Pentagon and the White House, an essential element in the U.S. strategy of global domination. You know, and so what Israel has been able to do for the United States is it's almost impossible to describe how extensive that has been. It's, whether it was, you know, retraining and training and arming the Guatemalan military back in the 1980s when they were committing genocide against the Mayan people, or providing the atomic bomb to South Africa at the time of the apartheid regime there. But most of all, and beyond any doubt, is the distorting effect, the impact on development in the Middle East itself, where Israel is really an implantation. It's an European implantation in the heart of the Arab world. And it has distorted life and development in that region to the benefit of imperialism, of U.S. imperialism in particular. for many decades now. And I think that's why they get the money that they get. There are differences between the U.S. and Israel over foreign policy, because Israel's priority is land. It's a land-hungry regime, and it has been ever since.
Yeah, they do the dirty work. We get a little degree of separation from it. We get some plausible deniability. Again, it's like global good cop, bad cop. Oh, you want to deal with us. You don't want to deal with our partner's crazy. If we leave you alone with this guy, I can't guarantee what's going to happen. You should be dealing with us, right? It's just a scam. This whole thing that like, oh, we have this different position. It's complete kayfabe. Yeah, the things you don't want your fingerprints on, for sure. And even like training militias and engaging in all kinds of assassinations and stuff, assassinating Iranian scientists and stuff like that. Absolutely.
And vote. They were not satisfied. The leaders of the early leaders of the state of Israel, they were never satisfied with their borders. From the very beginning, they believed that those borders were only temporary, that they would conquer Gaza, they would conquer the West Bank.
Genocidal cop, even more genocidal cop.
They wanted to do all of those things, and at various times did. And so that's their priority. U.S. priority is managing a global empire. And what the friction between the U.S. and Israel, to the extent that it exists, and it's not decisive by any means, has to do with the fact that the U.S. is managing the largest empire that's ever existed. And Israel is making people inside the empire who are oppressed by the empire very angry at Israel, but also very angry at the U.S. for providing the means by which Israel carries out this genocidal war and their oppression of the Palestinian people.
That's so important to break down. And I want to kind of elaborate on some of the points you made. But first, I want to ask you, why does it matter how we frame this relationship? Like, why does it matter that we understand it in the context of Israel as this huge U.S. military base versus the idea that, you know, obviously, yes, there is an Israel lobby in the U.S., and we can get into some of the specifics about why that lobby exists in a bit. But why does it matter, like having a specific understanding of Israel as an extension of America rather than, oh, it's actually the Israelis and their lobby running U.S. policy, and that's the reason we support Israel? Like, what does it matter?
Well, I mean, if you accept the argument or the idea that Israel controls the U.S., you would have to be talking about something that is really contrary to a materialist objective understanding. How would a country of, say, Israel's up to 9 million people now, with a large percentage of those not Israeli Jewish population, but Palestinian population, but it's 9 million people compared to the United States, which is 350 million or 340 million people now. The U.S. is an empire that's like never been seen before, 800 military bases around the world, and so on and so forth, and vast resources, huge military. And the idea that Israel somehow could control the United States really leads you in a very dangerous direction. And I think that dangerous direction is the long-time conspiracy theories that sometimes were called the Jewish banker, industrialist, and et cetera. All these theories that somehow, in the end, really come down to true anti-Semitism and the idea that somehow there's a worldwide conspiracy and it's controlled by Israel and it's controlled by Jewish people. That's a false. And if you believe that and that becomes your analysis, then you're headed, I think, in a very negative direction.
There's that, and I think there's also the importance of like recognizing that we can't let imperialism off the hook, right? Like it's like, and you make this point in your book. It would be like blaming U.S. Cuba policy on the anti-Cuba fascists who lobby for a blockade of Cuba. And to understand it that way would be to misunderstand U.S. imperialism. It's like you're missing the elephant in the room if you're not recognizing that this is a U.S. imperial asset, that the blockade of Cuba serves U.S. imperialism. It also serves Cuban fascists. But first and foremost, it serves Cuban imperialism, and also Cuban fascists also serve U.S. imperialism. But I feel like that, that's like an important element here too. If we don't understand the nature of this relationship, you can't protest it properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're really going, as I said, it takes you off in a bad direction. Mm-hmm. And to not understand what the Palestinians are really facing. And the Palestinian movement has talked about this from the beginning, that the more radical wing of the movement has always seen that their enemy is a threefold enemy. That is, first, of course, the state of Israel and its military. Secondly, U.S. imperialism, or maybe first U.S. imperialism and imperialism in general. And thirdly, the reactionary Arab regimes, these family monarchies and dictatorships that exist, supported by the U.S. And increasingly friendly to the state of Israel. The Palestinians really face an incredible array of forces against them. But it's important to understand that really it is U.S. imperialism that makes it possible for the state of Israel. And this has been true since the beginning of the Zionist project. It had to have a sponsor. At the beginning, it had no army and no navy. How could it be a colonizing force? It had aspired to be, but it couldn't really be a colonizing force without an army and a navy. And when they didn't have their own, they had to find one. And first it was the British. Then in the 50s and early 60s, it was France. And then today, and since 1968, it's been the United States. But one of the major imperialist powers' support has been necessary for the state of Israel to exist in the past and to exist in the present.
And that's a really good segue into what I wanted to ask you next. And I want to, before we get into the various ways that Israel has served U.S. interests throughout its history, I want to go back to its founding and even before its founding, because a lot of the popular narratives, and I'm talking here about mainstream narratives, they'll suggest that Israel was.
This guy's good. I'm wondering if he is related to Brian Becker. He even kind of sounds like him, but I really like his analysis though. It's really good.
Because Jews weren't safe in Europe, and they weren't safe in Europe. That's true. That Herzl, Theodore Herzl, had to go around and beg for support. He got British support for this Jewish colony, and then of course the Holocaust made it happen. But this also, this ignores the strategic nature of it as an outpost for the West. But also it ignores the chopping up of the Middle East, because, the idea of a Jewish state happened in conjunction, or the actual implementation, I should say, when the West got behind it, was happening in conjunction with the chopping up of the Middle East, the Sykes-Picot Agreement. And I'm just curious if you could put the Zionist project into that broader imperialist context that led up to the founding of Israel, which, I'm not denying that the Holocaust or the persecution of European Jews certainly helped reinforce the ideas of Zionist leaders, to go around and ask for help with a Jewish state. But it was kind of in the works before all that happened.
Well, yes. And as you say, there was a search for a sponsoring empire on the part of the early founders of Zionism, Theodore Herzl, succeeded by Chaim Weizmann. And between the first World Zionist Congress in 1897, it was about 20 years until they found their sponsor, and that was the British government. In the midst of World War I, they issued the Balfour Declaration, and that came from Arthur Balfour, who was the foreign secretary of the British Empire. 2 years earlier, the British had sent, and I think this very much pertains to the point about the modern Middle East. 2 years earlier, they'd sent an envoy to the Middle East to talk to leaders of the emerging Arab national movement and the Hashemite kingdom in the south of what is today, now South Saudi Arabia. And they promised the Arab people who were then within the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire was an enemy of the British Empire in the war, in World War I, that if the Arab people fought on the side of the British, the British would support them having an independent state at the end. The next year, in 1916, was the Sykes-Picot secret treaty that was negotiated between the British, French, and Russian empires. Others were included in it. And it was a plan for how, once they had conquered the Ottoman Empire, they would divide it up among themselves. And so you have that. And the Balfour Declaration came on November 2nd, 1917, saying that the British government supported a quote unquote national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. 5 days later was the Russian Revolution. And the relevance of that is that the new revolutionary government of Russia published the Sykes-Picot Treaty a few weeks after it took power. And so the people in the Middle East and the Arab world find out in late 1917 that not only was that a big lie about the support for an independent Arab state, but that in fact, the bigger colonizers were taking over, and Lebanon and Syria became French colonies, Iraq, Jordan, Palestine became British colonies. The stranglehold, the British stranglehold on Egypt was tightened even more. And so and then in the midst of that, in the middle of the Arab world, which is being cut up by the imperialists, they expressed support for a European colony in the very heart of the Arab world. And that's how the modern Middle East really came into being. And it's virtually unknown here. In the Middle East, it's very well known. Sykes-Picot, people know what Sykes-Picot means. They know what Balfour means. But part of the purpose of our book is, to people who are interested in this subject, to know where the modern Middle East came from and what was the part played by the Zionist colonial movement in that.
Yeah, Europeans love to chop up the global south, don't they? I mean, they get together, have these conferences, and they decide this goes to Europe, or this goes to France, this goes to Britain, this goes to Germany. I mean, even today in Lebanon, one of the languages is French. Like much of Africa, there's a huge part of Africa where everyone speaks French. It's because of this, and people in the U.S. just don't know that. But to go on from that, there's another common narrative that I would like you to debunk, and that is the idea. You'll often hear in the mainstream that Israel and the U.S. they have these shared Judeo-Christian values, right? They're both like democracies. Poor Israel's surrounded by just like hordes of barbaric Arabs, and it's sad for them, and we have to help them. But also, it's put into the context of this sympathy for Jewish people, that like we have to support Israel because Jews have been so persecuted. We had to we had to support the founding of Israel because Jews have been so persecuted. And this is such a pretense, obviously, because like you're basically using these people as human shields for imperialism. But even when it comes to the founding of Israel, I actually wanted to ask you this question. There's this common belief that nobody really knew about the Holocaust until after it happened.
Not true.
Did the Europeans know what the Nazis were? Did America know what the Nazis were doing? I should ask. Did they know what was happening? Maybe maybe not the extent of it, but did they know what was happening and just not intervene? Or what was the case there? And is this really
Alan Dulles was getting all kinds of information about that, and he was shutting it down.
Well, just before around the time that the war started, I believe it was in 1940 in Europe, there was a bill, a proposition that came before the U.S. Congress to allow 20,000 German Jewish children to be allowed in above the quota. There was a very racist quota system, very discriminatory, but it failed. And Franklin Roosevelt, who was then president, refused to get behind it. We quote in the book his cousin, who was married to the U.S. Commissioner of Immigration at the time, saying, and 20,000 beautiful children will all too soon turn into 20,000 ugly adults. This is in the ruling class of the United States. I mean, the level of anti-Semitism within the ruling class was so great that Roosevelt, who was a liberal, didn't want to go up against it. But so the idea that nobody knew what was happening. No, I mean, this was in 1939 or 1940. So, but
take care,
on,
only facts.
There was an appeal made. The killing in the concentration camps was murder on an industrial scale. You can't without an industrial scale. You couldn't. They couldn't.
There was actual Germans that were like risking everything trying to make sure that information was getting out to America and to allies,
particularly railroads.
And then having that information get buried.
And sometimes people were going right out of boxcars where they had been confined into gas chambers. So there was
there's a lot of stuff about that in Devil's Chessboard.
The British and the U.S. bombers were flying hundreds or thousands of missions a day over Germany and Poland. German held Europe, and the commanders refused to do it and said it wasn't strategic to do so. Before the war, some of the leading families, and this is very important to all of this, the Kennedys, the Fords, the Bushes, they were all very pro-Nazi, pro-German, pro-Nazi, and it was them along with them the America First movement headed by Charles Lindbergh, which they were very anti-Semitic. They were profoundly anti-Semitic. In 1943, the only Jewish member of the U.S. cabinet, Henry Morgenthau, Secretary of the Treasury,
talk you through all this.
Happy Friday, getting a new water tank and water softener today.
Tyrell, thanks for the 20 months. Love that for you. Enjoy the new water tank and water softener. We love it. Thanks again.
Went so far as to have his department write a report attacking the State Department. I've never heard of this happening at any other time in U.S. history. Maybe it has, but and saying that the State Department not only was not helping to relieve the mass slaughter, the genocide that was going on against Jewish people and also against other people, Slavic people. 2/3 of the Roma people were destroyed by the Nazis. But he said not only is the government, the State Department, and the government not helping, it's making matters worse. After the war, then they all pretend, once the decision was made and it was a big fight over it, to support the creation of the State of Israel, then they would try to, the leaders in Washington would
it's okay, Tyrell. I'll try to forgive you.
Great sympathy for what had happened to Jewish people in order for another purpose, the creation of the Zionist state.
Yeah, it's so twisted, using one genocide to essentially justify another. But I want to talk to you about Israel's role historically to today in serving U.S. imperial interests. So let's give some concrete examples here. I think there's a few times worth highlighting when Israel served imperial interests. I mean, the Cold War comes to mind. There's Israel's role when it comes to Egypt, when it comes to Iraq, when it comes to Syria, Lebanon, and even beyond the Middle East. So, I mean, let's start with the Middle East during the Cold War, because Israel did play a significant role then. So can you talk about, in Israel's younger days, what was Israel's role in serving imperial interests, particularly when it came to the Cold War in the region?
Well, I think that another forgotten chapter, and there are many forgotten chapters in this story in the U.S., but one is that in 1956, the Israeli government, headed by David Ben-Gurion at the time, colluded first with France, and then they brought the British in on it too, to overthrow the government in Egypt. And the idea here was that what had happened was Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was the president of Egypt and the most prominent Arab leader of the time, of the Arab national movement, had nationalized the Suez Canal in 1956. The Suez Canal was a waterway entirely within Egypt, but this was treated as a great insult. And the New York Daily News had a full-page headline that said "The Hitler of the Nile," about Nasser for having dared to nationalize the canal. The British and the French had owned the canal. The British were the primary holders. They wanted the canal back. France was fighting the Algerian Revolution and believed that if they could shut down, they could overthrow the Nasser government and shut down Free Radio Algeria, that they would be able to defeat the Algerian Revolution. And the Israelis wanted land. And their idea, and they presented it to the other people just before the war started, was that Jordan should be done away with as a country. Iraq should absorb Jordan on the condition that they would take in all the Palestinian refugees. Israel would get the Litani River, Lebanon up to the Litani River. They would get Gaza. They would get the West Bank. They would get the whole Sinai Peninsula. That was a little too much for their partners. They started the war. It was a provocation. It crashed and burned as an idea. But the idea was based on land hunger. They were willing to do this, and they were willing to assist. And the U.S. stopped it. They intervened in this. Eisenhower, because the British and French hadn't told the U.S. that they were going to do this, and he also threatened Israel to be thrown out of the United Nations and finished as a country.
Colonize his own land. That's right.
What the idea was.
Nationalizing public resources and infrastructure. It's just like Hitler.
It was presented in the U.S. as a defensive war by Israel against looming catastrophe. 20 years later, the leaders, Moshe Dayan, Menachem
They
Begin,
do love calling Arabs Hitler.
That's not really what happened.
Strange.
We were not really facing a dire threat. But that, of course, is when Golan Heights, West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, and for a time, the whole Sinai Peninsula were conquered by Israel. And this was viewed very favorably in Washington. Gerald Ford, who was the House Minority Leader, later he would be president, he said to the effect, Israel has really done the job we needed done, something like that. That was a time when Syria was being called the Cuba of the Middle East. And there was a high point of radicalism where this smashing of the Syrian and Egyptian militaries and the Jordanian Air Force as well was a big setback. It was a huge setback to the Arab national movement, and particularly its more revolutionary forces. Later, there would be an end to Israel's control of Sinai, but the rest of those territories that I mentioned remain under Israeli control, but in a war that really was to the advantage of Washington and U.S. imperialism, as well as to the Israeli government, and was viewed as the signal that the U.S. should begin pouring billions of dollars under Nixon, who was elected in 1968, to Israel to really build it up and make it the kind of the Western pole, with Iran as the Eastern pole, when the Shah was still there, of control over the Middle East.
Yeah, and then not to mention, I mean, then you get to the Lebanese Civil War, and you had the U.S. and Israel basically like supporting fascists against leftists and all the pro-Palestine movements and armed groups.
Can you imagine?
Palestinian resistance themselves that was based in Lebanon, and on and on. I mean, it's one country after another, and that's throughout the Cold War era. I wanted to ask about, if we could zoom out a little bit, because Israel's usefulness wasn't limited just to the Middle East.
Genzel, I'm not sure I understand your question here. You say, would it be okay if they made a deal where Israel offers 43% better part of land to Palestine and share Jerusalem? Would that sound fair? I mean, I think what's fair, if in the idea of having Israel like offering something in this two-state deal, it would be, as people have said for now decades, it would be along the 1967 borders. And anything that's not along that is probably a non-starter. And anyway, they're not going to offer that anyways because they're not interested in offering that. So it's not really a matter, like, first of all, no, it's not fair. So I think that would probably be a non-starter. And Israel's not interested in doing that anyway. They don't want a Palestinian state. They made that very clear.
You had also Latin America. I mean, Israel's played quite the role across Latin America.
The
for example.
67 borders is incredibly generous already.
Where Israel comes into play as being, doing, I guess, I don't know what you would call it, like a reinforcement for the U.S. maybe?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Israel has done is things that the U.S. wanted done but didn't want to be seen responsible for. And that's important.
All the things we've been saying are just being reconfirmed in this interview.
82, 83, there was a big debate in the United States in the Congress about funding for the Guatemalan military. The Guatemalan and the U.S. funding was cut off in 83, or at least officially cut off. And the Guatemalan army was carrying out genocide. Even people, like top leaders of the U.S. would later say, yeah, it was genocide when it was done. But genocide against the Mayan population, which is a rebellion against, the vast majority of the people in Guatemala, but ruled by European descended elite. And so Israel stepped in, became the trainers of the military, armed them. The Galil rifle produced in Israel became the standard field weapon for the Guatemalan military, and the genocide went on. But now it could appear that it wasn't the U.S. that was responsible. It was someone else. Israel supported the fascist military junta in Chile. And then beyond Latin America, as I mentioned, in 1979, Israel, working with the apartheid regime in South Africa, with which it had excellent relations, and with the other racist regimes like in Rhodesia,
right up until the very end,
so-called, they detonated an atomic bomb in the South Atlantic. And that's how South Africa got the atomic bomb. And why did the U.S. want that? Because at that time, South Africa was not only an apartheid state exploiting the black population internally, it also was assigned the role of protecting U.S. imperialist and other imperialist interests in all of sub-Saharan Africa. So it would go to war after Angolan independence in late 1975. It would go to war against the government. It was only really the intervention of Cuban troops armed by the Soviet Union, together with the Angolan military, that prevented Angola in 1976 from becoming a South African colony. And this was all considered, this was all supported by the U.S. But the U.S. at the time didn't want to be seen publicly as supporting the apartheid regime.
Some people, there's been this argument too that, and this is also kind of a more mainstream argument among some of the more liberal types. One person that comes to mind is Stephen Simon. He's the former U.S. National Security Council Senior Director for the Middle East and North Africa. Well, that's a mouthful, under Obama. So he played a role during the Obama years, and obviously Obama, his team helped negotiate the Iran nuclear deal, something that the Israelis were actively lobbying against. I mean, you remember Netanyahu came to Congress and gave a speech where he advocated against the policy of a sitting U.S. president, which was kind of insane. But Stephen Simon wrote this book. It's called Our Separate Ways, The Struggle for the Future of the U.S.-Israel Alliance. And in it, he makes this argument that is kind of about how Israel's no longer needed like it once was. Not that the U.S. should cut off ties with Israel or anything like that, but that there's obviously this fracture and Israel's not as useful as it once was. And he kind of portrays it in this really paternalistic way where it's like Israel's our child and it needs to just grow up. But the reason I bring that up is because, we talked about a lot of the things that Israel did in the past, but now there's this idea that, it doesn't really do so much anymore. Now it's just this, country that doesn't listen to us. It goes rogue all the time. It's like a, child throwing a temper tantrum. And we don't it's actually it makes us less safe as a country. This is kind of the liberal capitalist argument from certain segments of liberal America that you'll hear. So I'm curious, when we talk about more modern times, let's say the last 30 years, how has Israel in the last 30 years, served U.S. imperialist interests?
Well, I think if you look at just in kind of an overall, if you look at what the direction of U.S. foreign policy is today, it's shifting its main priority from West Asia to East Asia, with the pivot to Asia, so-called. And but the Middle East and North Africa remains very important, very strategic. Palestine, is at a crossroads of three continents: Asia, Africa, and Europe. And you could argue that the fact that the U.S. is shifting so much of its force to preparation for war with China, which would be, unbelievably catastrophic, or have unbelievably catastrophic consequences, but they're doing it that could make Israel more important, not less important to the U.S. because the relationship. I mean, Israel, as I said many times before, Israel is a small country but a large military base, a very large. And one of the things that we've seen revealed in the course of what's happened since October 7th is that the U.S. has a lot of supplies in the pre-positioning of vast quantities of material there. So the idea, as you said earlier, of the shared Judeo-Christian blah blah blah, that's what it is. It's just blah blah blah. The reality is
total bullshit. We made it up.
It really serves the interest of U.S. imperialism in that part of the world above all, and that's how they see it. And that's not, by the way, that's not really a relationship of friendship. No. It's like a high-paid security guard for U.S. interests in the Middle East.
And also, I mean, you mentioned something earlier that kind of just made my mind go to what Israel does in Iran, right? When the U.S. when Israel does America's dirty work, like things the U.S. isn't quite comfortable doing on paper. And it makes me think of Israel killing Iranian scientists, for example. Yeah. That's not something that happens outside of some sort of coordination with the U.S. Military, security, whatever you want.
They keep saying stuff that we were saying earlier. Or when ISIS does it. And then when Israel doesn't want to be implicated, ISIS does it. But, that's a whole other thing.
I call it intelligence apparatus.
3 degrees of separation.
The U.S. is all good with that. Israel is very much needed to counter Iran, which, when it comes to the Middle East, America sees Iran or West Asia.
Genzel, I'm going to say no to your question, but also I don't think these are the places where you should be asking these questions. I'm not Palestinian. I would go and go find someone that's Palestinian that's interested in having this conversation and ask them a question like that. And you can see what they say. It's like, this is not something that I'm really going to answer and be able to have a satisfactory answer for. But I'm going to say my initial answer to the question you just asked is no. Would it be okay if they stripped off Hamas and Palestine can be citizens like Arabs in Israel, or do they want their own state? Like these are all hypotheticals that are like, this is not going to happen. Like what you're describing. Because if Hamas just went away and everything became Israel and Palestinians just lived there, the only way that would be maintained, just the way Israel is currently maintained, is through apartheid. So this is this nonsensical hypothetical situation that you're kind of proposing here.
America sees Iran as the big enemy. If it were to pull out its support for Israel, the U.S. would say, this will just hand it right over to Iran. And we can't possibly risk that. But I want to ask you about October 7th now and the genocide in Gaza, because I'm of a couple opinions here. I think that October 7th in Israel is really an actual failure in a security sense to be able to deal with an attack from Palestinian resistance groups acting out of a death camp. Well, what's now turned into a death camp, acting out of a concentration camp in Gaza, shows that it's not actually as strong as it tries to portray itself as being. So if I was the U.S., I'd be slightly concerned that my military base is not, in tip-top shape. But more importantly, I guess, I have thoughts on why the U.S. is supporting the genocide in Gaza, but I'm curious your take on that. Why? Why support this gruesome eradication of Palestinians in Gaza that Israel's carrying out right now? I mean, obviously there's some differences in how the U.S. would prefer to see this genocide, this war waged, as they've said publicly, but otherwise they're supporting it, no question. So what does the U.S. get out of it?
Well, I think that it's terrible that the U.S. is doing what it's doing, and those bombs, the planes that drop the bombs, that's all coming from the U.S. and it continues to. We don't really know how many emergency resupplies of bombs there have been, but there have been many. The last time I saw was 28. So the U.S. government is more than going along with Israel. It's really a partner in the war against the people of Gaza. They, of course, want to crush all resistance movements to imperialism, regardless if they're led by communists or Islamists, whoever it is who's resisting the U.S. wants to crush them there and all over the region and all over the world. I mean, that's their, the kind of it's a lodestar of their foreign policy is to defeat revolutionary and progressive and resistance movements that stand in the way of empire. So at the same time,
if you enjoyed this episode and want to hear the rest, you can access it by becoming a Breakthrough News member.
Great interview. And yeah, that guy must be related to Brian Becker. He really sounds exactly like him and has the same name and some of the same mannerisms. But I mean, good. That was a really good interview and analysis, and interesting because it was like a really kind of a confirmation of a lot of the things that we were already talking about on this program, or just today. No, that was not Klaus Schwab. Public enemy number one, Klaus Schwab. So I do have to get going fairly soon, folks. About another 15, 20 minutes. This has been another fantastic stream, fantastic episode of TRRS. If you can, please subscribe. 14 subs away from the goal. 29 subs away from singing a little song. That would be a nice way to end the stream, end the show, end the week. But still, only 14 subs to go to get to the main goal, the primary goal. Joe, hell yeah. Thank you for 5 gifted subs. Joe, that's very, very kind of you. Very much appreciated. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for supporting this program. And yes, if you've been tuning in today, if you're new to the community, if you've been around for a while, if you're a lurker, if the algorithm has brought you here somehow today, please subscribe if you can. Please subscribe if you can. 9 subs away from the goal. If possible, please subscribe. Join the community. Support the work that I do here on Twitch. As you know, the only way that I'm able to keep doing this show each and every day is if the little number at the bottom of the screen goes up. The numbers just got to go up. That's just that's just the economic reality of doing this show. So if you do enjoy this program, if you like tuning in, if you like being part of this community, if you appreciate the analysis and the conversations and the silliness and whatever else that happens on here, please subscribe. Get all the tiny little images. Get all the tiny images. Support the show. Support the community. Join the community. Become part of the community. Become one with the community.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Plunger Man, thank you for the 5 gifted subs as well. Very, very kind of you. Plunger Man's one with the community.
Through all this.
Why is it different every time with the alerts? That's my question. Why is it different every time?
You've just become an elite member of the Friendship Triangle.
Why is it different every time? I don't know. But thank you very much, Plunger Man, for the 5 gifted subs. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. Tried to purchase subs 4 times before it worked. Great. Thank you, Twitch. It's really easy to move subs for the Twitch Corporation when the shit just doesn't even work. The Chaos Zone, indeed. Who knows? That's the funny thing. It's like we don't know at any given time. Are the alerts going to work? Is it not going to? We don't know. We have no idea. But now just 4 subs away from the goal, folks. 4 subs. 4 measly, itty-bitty subs away from the goal. We're at 31. I'm trying to hit these targets on a daily basis. That is how I make a living, for a small living, to be clear, from the Twitch Corporation, is if the little number goes up and becomes the good number. Randomized sub alerts. That would be funny. That would be very funny. I don't know if this song is a possibility. It seems like it's going to be, I have to wait for another day. I'm telling you though, this one's going to be something else. I'm even trying to download a reverb plugin into OBS so I can really take this shit seriously. It's not My Heart Will Go On, no, even though I do like that song. No, I'm not going to do Nickelback either. We're going to get there one day, folks. Maybe it won't be today. Maybe it won't be next week. Maybe it won't be next month. We will get there again, though. And I think people will be pleasantly surprised by my selection. Inshallah. Do Heart of Gold by Neil Young. I mean, that's a great request. I love that song. That's a fucking great song. So I'll add that to the list. It is a banger. I also really love Harvest Moon. Neil Young songs. A little bit more of like a crooning track, that one. Chat, only 4 measly subs to go to get to the goal. Only 4 measly subs to get to the goal. Can you believe it? Can you believe that? I know, it's within grasp. It's within reach. Just a few brave heroes could step in. And get this show to the sub goal for today. Only 4. That's so few. We need 4 more before I can start playing Helldivers 2. Blunderman, I haven't played in a while. I feel like I'm letting the galaxy down. I've been too distracted by the NBA playoffs. I haven't been helldiving at all lately. Four measly subs to go, folks. Please support the work that I do on here. Support independent media. You know, as I've talked about before, I don't really have an opportunity, despite the fact that I've got a large platform on social media and elsewhere. I don't really have much of an opportunity to weigh in our mainstream media, but what I do have is this show. You know, independent media, it's more important than ever. I only play solo and I'm at level 15 and I have to play on easy mode. God, that's gotta be tough, Plunger Man. You gotta find a squad. You not have a squad? Because it's really fun when you get to play with a team, especially when you're people that you kind of know. And the higher difficulties are so much fun too. You gotta friend me on Helldivers so we can put together a team.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
We're putting together a team. Dummy Darko, thanks for the gifted sub. I played a couple times with other folks and it was really chaotic for my brain. It is a lot. It is kind of like a sensory overload. That is true. Dummy Darko, thank you for that. Only 3 subs to go, folks. Only 3 little subs to go, and I'll stop bugging you about it. I'll stop asking. Only 3 little bitty subs to go. 1 brave hero Or maybe a few brave heroes could step through. I'm really losing energy. I really got the 3 p.m. EPs right now. I'm low energy, Rob. I'm low. My gas tank's getting low here. My tank's getting low. That's right, Alexandra. That's what I'm doing. That's me. The funniest thing about that, like, emote, that gif where I'm pretending to cry, is that was watching, like, this cop dramatically retire rather than getting vaxxed. He dramatically retired and gave this big sanctimonious speech over the radio. And like 6 months later, he had died of COVID. That was a fun period when all the cops were quitting and making dramatic speeches on the radio and that kind of stuff.
We simply use the computer to mark up the size of the account.
Yeah,
I forgot how funny those retiring cops were. LMAO.
Though that was great. Thank you so much, Matt, for the 300 bits. I appreciate it. That was really there was a lot of that stuff. That was really fantastic. That guy was so funny too, because you could tell, like, he's like, oh, I'm the main character right now. I'm the main character of the movie. I'm being forced out because I'm unclean, I think he said. There were so many of those. The dramatic filmed resignations. And then he did die. Yeah, he died of COVID. You know, and would the vaccine have helped him? Probably. Perhaps not. I don't know. We'll never know now, though, I guess. They stopped reporting the casualty numbers, just like the entity. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Packwatch. Chad, we're three subs away. I just feel like I can just reach out and just grab the sub goal. Look at that. Yeah. Yeah. It's so close. If I could just physically, like, force it, like using the force or something. Yeah. It's so close. I can just reach out and grab it. Ugh. I don't think the singing is in the cards today, Ames. I don't think the singing is in the cards. That's okay. That's fine. You know? Those are special occasions. I get it. I do have something pretty special planned, though. So, when that day does come, whether it's next week, next month, next year, whenever it is, I got something special for you. I've got something very special for you. I'm going to raid David Tavares. And you know what? I know those last 3 subs are going to come in. I'm not even worried about it. I've never been less concerned with anything in my entire life. I know for a fact those 3 subs are coming in. I know with absolute certainty, with absolute 100% certainty, I know that the number is going to go up. What's above 100%? That's the level of certainty that I have. That's the level of certainty I have that it's going to go up. 110. Let's say 200%. I know, that's double. That's double the 100%. I know. That's how confident I am in this. And I know any second they're going to come in there. In fact, they're going to come now. Now.